Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. Mom, this isn't my body. It started as a single sentence, a jagged crack in the smooth surface of my reality. I stood in front of the full-length mirror on my closet door, the one I'd checked a million times before basketball practice or on my way out to meet friends. But the person staring back wasn't me. The words came out in a breathless whisper, thin and reedy. It was a voice I didn't recognize, higher than my own, shivering with a terror so profound it felt like ice water flooding my veins. My mom, hearing the strangled sound from downstairs, came running. The nightmare had begun before I even opened my eyes. It started with a feeling, a vague sense of wrongness. I was floating in that hazy space between sleep and waking, aware of a strange lightness in my limbs. A curtain of hair, not my own buzzed shortcut, tickled my chin and neck. The oversized band t-shirt I'd worn to bed felt different, too. It wasn't draped over the familiar, angular frame I knew. It was sliding against skin that felt softer, smoother, almost silken. I blinked, the ceiling of my room slowly coming into focus. Everything was the same, the chipped, glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck up there years ago, the poster of my favorite skateboarder frozen mid-air, the deep blue walls that I'd insisted on painting myself. It was my room, my sanctuary. But something was horribly, fundamentally wrong. I sat up, and the world tilted. The movement was too fluid, too graceful. My center of gravity had shifted. I looked down, and that's when the real panic clawed its way up my throat. My chest wasn't flat. Beneath the worn cotton of my shirt, there were two soft, rounded mounds. They were sensitive, heavy in a way I couldn't comprehend. I instinctively brought my hands up, my fingers brushing against them. The sensation was alien. It wasn't like touching someone else. It was like a part of me had been replaced by something foreign, something that didn't belong. A choked sob escaped my lips. This was a dream. It had to be. A sick, twisted dream brought on by too much pizza and video games before bed. I swung my legs over the side of the mattress, a motion I'd done thousands of times, but my body didn't cooperate. My hips were wider, fuller, and they made the movement awkward, unbalanced. The fabric of my pajama pants, loose and baggy on me just last night, now clung to a distinct curve. I staggered to my feet, my legs feeling unsteady, like I was learning to walk all over again. The floorboards were cold. A familiar sensation that did nothing to ground me. My gaze was locked on the closet door, on the mirror that held the truth I was desperately trying to deny. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. Each step was a battle against my own mind, which was screaming, "Don't look! Don't you dare look!" But I had to. I had to see the monster. I reached the mirror, my own strange, slender hand resting on the cool wood of the doorframe. I forced myself to look up. And Alex was gone. In his place was a girl, a stranger with wide, terrified blue eyes, my eyes. But they were swimming in a face that wasn't mine. The jawline was softer, the chin less pronounced. My lips, once thin, were now fuller, and the hair, my short brown hair, was gone, replaced by a cascade of dark waves that tumbled past my shoulders, reaching the middle of my back. The body was just as foreign, slender shoulders, a defined, narrow waist, and those gentle curving hips. My arms were thinner. The wiry muscles I'd been so proud of vanished, replaced by a smooth, delicate line. This body was small, fragile. It looked like a gust of wind could knock it over. That's when the scream I'd been holding back finally tore through me. It wasn't my usual shout, the one that echoed in the gym or across the skate park. It was a high, piercing shriek of pure, unadulterated horror. And that was the moment my parents ran in. My dad was first, his face a mask of concern, followed closely by my mom, her hand already covering her mouth. But their expressions weren't surprised. They were something far worse. They were terrified. Yes, but there was a flicker of something else in their eyes, guilt and recognition. They knew, somehow. They already knew. "Alex," my mom whispered, her voice trembling. "Mom, this isn't my body," I said again, the words fracturing as they left my lips. My voice, this new, higher voice, cracked with a sob. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around me. Her embrace was familiar, but the way my body fit against hers was not. I was shorter. I fit under her chin in a way I hadn't since I was a little kid. The scent of her morning coffee, a smell that usually comforted me, only made the unreality of the situation more intense. "Oh, honey," she breathed into my hair, my long, strange hair. "I am so sorry." My dad stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. It's the Eve 9, he said, his voice raw. Eve 9. I pulled away from my mom, looking from her tear-streaked face to my dad's grim one. "What are you talking about? What's happening to me?" Mom took my hands. Her grip was tight, desperate. "We saw it on the news last night. Alex, a new strain of the virus, right here in our city. We hoped it was just fear-mongering." The Eve 9 virus. I'd heard about it. Of course, whispers at school, sensational headlines on the internet, a bizarre, fast-acting pathogen that targeted adolescents. It didn't make you sick, not in the traditional sense. It did something else, something unimaginable. They said it rewrote your genetic code, messed with your hormones during the delicate, volatile period of puberty. It forced your body to change in a matter of hours. The virus? It causes a spontaneous, biological transition, my dad explained, his words stiff and clinical, like he was trying to create distance from the horror. It rewrites your body's hormonal and genetic expression. Transition, the word hung in the air, grotesque and obscene. I wasn't transitioning, I was being erased. "So you can fix it, right?" I pleaded, my gaze darting between them. "There's a cure, a treatment, you can change me back." My mom's face crumpled. They don't know. There are rumors of reversal therapies, but nothing is confirmed. It's too new. The floor fell out from under me. I looked back at the mirror, at the strange girl trapped in my reflection. Her expression was a perfect mirror of my own internal agony. I saw the defiant posters on my wall, my scuffed-up skateboard leaning against the desk where I did my homework, my electric guitar resting in its stand. Everything in this room screamed Alex. The scuffed combat boots by the door, the stack of graphic novels, the worn-out basketball in the corner. But the body, this new, soft, curved body, was a jarring contradiction to it all. The sleep shirt I was wearing had slipped off one shoulder, exposing a delicate collarbone and smooth, pale skin. I reflexively hugged myself, and my hands immediately landed on the soft weight of my chest. A jolt, like an electric shock, shot through me. It was real. This was real. The question that had been screaming in my mind finally broke free. "Why me?" I whispered, the words barely audible. Why did this happen to me? My parents had no answer. There was no answer. There was only this cold, suffocating horror. I was a prisoner in a body that wasn't mine. The boy who had gone to sleep last night, the boy who loved skating and playing guitar and hanging out with his friends, was gone. And in his place stood this terrified, fragile girl who I didn't know and who I never ever wanted to be. My own personal journey of self-discovery, it seemed, was beginning as a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. For the next 3 days, my world shrank to the 4 blue walls of my bedroom. The door was locked, the heavy curtains drawn tight, plunging the room into a perpetual twilight. I refused to let in the sun, because the sun would illuminate the truth. The sun would cast a shadow on the floor, and it wouldn't be my shadow. I became an expert at avoiding my own reflection. The mirror on the closet door was the enemy, a cruel portal to a reality I refused to accept. I draped my biggest, darkest hoodie over it, smothering the image of the stranger who lived in my room. I avoided the darkened screen of my laptop, the blank face of my phone. Any surface that could show me her was my enemy. My body was a constant, infuriating reminder. Every sensation was a betrayal. When I lay in bed, the slight weight of my chest pressing against the mattress was a source of endless discomfort. If I rolled over, the feeling of my new, wider hips shifting under the blanket sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. The long hair was the worst. It was always there, tickling my neck, getting caught on my pillow, brushing against my shoulders when I moved. It felt like a parasitic vine that had attached itself to me in the night. Even my own voice was a stranger. When I spoke, the sound that came out was softer, higher, a few times. I tried to force my old voice, to push it out from my diaphragm, but it just came out as a strained, pathetic squeak, so I stopped talking. Silence was safer. On the second day, a primal need for familiarity drove me to my closet. I needed to feel like myself again, even for a moment. I ripped the hoodie off the mirror without looking and pulled open the doors. My clothes hung there, a row of ghosts from my past life, my favorite pair of worn-out jeans, the home jersey for the high school basketball team, the stack of graphic tees. This would fix it, I thought, a desperate, irrational hope bubbling in my chest. If I could just put on my own clothes, I would feel like Alex again. I grabbed the jeans first. They were perfectly broken in, soft from 100 washes, with a hole forming in the left knee. I stepped into them, but my relief was short-lived. I couldn't pull them up. They stopped, impossibly. At the curve of my new hips, I tugged, I grunted, I pulled with all my might, but the denim wouldn't budge. It was like trying to force a puzzle piece into the wrong spot. My jeans, no longer recognized my body. Frustration and grief warred within me. I threw them across the room, a strangled cry of rage escaping my lips. Fine, I'd try a shirt. I grabbed the basketball jersey. It was big and loose. It had to fit. I pulled it over my head. The material settled over my shoulders, but it didn't hang right. Instead of falling flat, it tented awkwardly over my chest, the numbers stretching in a way they never had before. It looked like a costume, a cruel, mocking costume. I tore it off, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked at the rows of clothes, at the fabric that held the shape and the memories of the person I used to be. Every shirt, every pair of pants, was a monument to a boy who was dying, or maybe was already dead. The real Alex is disappearing, I whispered to the empty room, the alien sound of my own voice making me flinch. In the end, I found one thing I could still wear: an old, ridiculously oversized black hoodie I'd kept since middle school. It was shapeless, a giant sack of fleece that swallowed me whole. It hid the new curves, concealed the narrowness of my waist, and when I pulled the hood up, it cast my face in shadow and helped me forget about the long, flowing hair. It became my uniform, my armor. My parents tried to coax me out. They'd knock softly on the door, their voices muffled and full of a strained gentleness. "Alex, honey, can we bring you something to eat?" my mom would ask. I'd just sit on my bed, silent, listening to their footsteps retreat. They'd leave a tray of food outside the door, and I'd wait until I was sure they were gone before cracking it open, grabbing whatever was there, and locking myself back inside my fortress of misery. I could hear their hushed, worried conversations through the floorboards. They didn't know what to do. No one knew what to do. I was a walking, breathing medical anomaly, a freak of nature locked in an upstairs bedroom. My entire existence had become about denial. If I didn't see the body, it wasn't real. If I didn't feel the clothes that didn't fit, it hadn't happened. If I hid under a hoodie and refused to speak, maybe, just maybe, I could pretend that the Alex I knew hadn't been completely and utterly annihilated. But every time I moved, every breath I took in this new, smaller lung capacity was a whisper of the horrifying truth. The prison wasn't the room, it was my own skin. It was my mom who finally breached the fortress on the 4th day of my self-imposed exile. She used the spare key. I didn't even look up from my spot on the floor where I was staring at a crack in the plaster. I just heard the soft click of the lock and the creak of the door. She stepped inside, carrying a couple of large shopping bags from a department store I didn't recognize. She set them quietly on the edge of my bed. The room was stuffy, smelling of stale food and despair. "Honey, we need to talk," she said softly. Sitting on the corner of the mattress, I didn't respond, just hugged my knees tighter to my chest. My oversized hoodie smelled like me, the old me, and I buried my face in it. She sighed, a sound heavy with a mother's pain. "I know you're hurting. I know you're scared and angry, but you can't stay in here forever. Alex, you can't just disappear." I finally looked at her, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "I already have," I croaked. Her heart broke in her eyes. She reached into one of the bags and pulled something out. It was a soft, dark gray sweater. Then came a pair of black pants made of a stretchy, unfamiliar material, leggings. My brain supplied numbly, and then the final mortifying item, a simple, plain white bra. My face flushed with a hot, shameful heat. I scrambled backwards, away from the offending items. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "Get that stuff out of here. I'm not wearing that." "Alex, listen to me." Her voice was still gentle, but there was a new firmness in it, a practical resolve that cut through my haze of misery. She held up the sweater. "This isn't about changing you. This is about fitting your body. Your old clothes don't fit. They hurt you to even look at. These are just things to cover your skin so you don't have to hide in the dark." Her logic was infuriatingly sound. I hated it. I hated her for being right. I wanted to scream and throw things, but I was too exhausted. The fight had drained out of me, leaving only a hollow ache. "Just try," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Please, for me." I stared at the clothes lying on my bed. They looked so innocent, just pieces of fabric. But to me, they were symbols of surrender. Wearing them meant admitting that this was real. It meant accepting this new horrific form. But looking at my mom's exhausted, desperate face, I felt a tiny flicker of something other than my own pain. I gave a stiff, miserable nod. She gave me a watery smile and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. For a long time, I just stared at the pile of clothes, the sweater, the leggings, the bra. That last one felt like a bomb. I'd never even seen one up close. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I picked it up. It was all straps and hooks, an alien contraption. I fumbled with it, trying to figure out how it worked, my cheeks burning the entire time. After several frustrating minutes, I managed to get it on. The feeling was bizarre. It was restrictive, yet supportive. It was a constant, gentle pressure against my skin, a stark reminder of the flesh that I was trying so hard to forget. It was horrible. Next, the leggings. I pulled them on, and the soft elastic material slid over my legs and hips with an unnerving ease. Unlike my jeans, they didn't fight me. They accommodated the new curves without protest. They felt comfortable. I hated myself for noticing. The way they hugged my body made me acutely aware of its new shape, the shape I'd been trying to ignore. Finally, the sweater. It was just a simple crew neck pullover. I took off my beloved grimy hoodie, the loss of its familiar weight like shedding a shield. I pulled the new sweater over my head. As the soft knit settled over my shoulders and torso, a strange thing happened. It fit. It didn't pull awkwardly across my chest. It didn't hang off my now slimmer shoulders like a bag. The sleeves were the right length, ending neatly at my wrists. The hem rested perfectly on my hips. It just fit smoothly, correctly. I stood up, the new clothes feeling both foreign and disturbingly natural, with a deep sense of dread. I turned to the one thing I had been avoiding for days. I walked over to my closet and with a trembling hand, lifted the corner of the hoodie I'd used to cover the mirror. I peeked, then I let the hoodie fall to the floor. The person staring back at me was still a stranger, a girl with my frightened eyes, but she no longer looked like a monster. She didn't look like a boy squeezed into the wrong shape, dressed in clothes that were made for her body. She just looked like a girl, a normal, if utterly miserable, girl. For the first time since this nightmare began, the overwhelming sense of physical disgust lessened. Just by a fraction. The reflection wasn't a glitch anymore. It was a coherent image. The clothes created a sense of harmony between the body and its presentation. The realization brought a fresh wave of conflict. A part of me was relieved to not feel like a distorted freak, but another, much louder part of me screamed in protest. I felt a profound sense of guilt for this sliver of relief. It felt like a betrayal to the Alex I had been. Feeling comfortable in these clothes felt like I was helping the virus win, like I was becoming complicit in my own erasure. I hated it, but as I stood there, for the first time in days, I could actually look at my own reflection without wanting to shatter the glass. And that tiny, treacherous feeling of rightness was the most terrifying thing of all. Going back to school was like walking into my own execution. My parents had called the principal, explained the situation as much as anyone could explain the inexplicable, The school, scrambling to deal with a situation no one had ever anticipated, made a decision, for administrative purposes, for now. Alex was to be known as Lexi. The name felt like a costume I was forced to wear. Just like the clothes, Lexi. It sounded foreign, delicate. It wasn't me. Walking through the crowded hallways was a special kind of hell. Every head turned, conversations died as I passed, only to erupt in a frenzy of whispers behind my back. I could feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them, a physical weight on my new, slender shoulders. They weren't just stares of curiosity, they were looks of morbid fascination, pity, and in some cases, disgust. I pulled the sleeves of my dark sweater down over my hands and kept my eyes glued to the scuffed toes of my old combat boots, the one piece of my past self I could still wear. I felt like an exhibit in a zoo for freaks. Step right up, see the boy who turned into a girl. I found my locker, my fingers fumbling with the combination lock. My hands were smaller, less calloused, and the familiar motion felt clumsy. I just wanted to get my books and disappear into the anonymity of a classroom. That looks frustrating. The voice came from beside me. It was calm, steady, and held no trace of the mocking or shock I had been steeling myself against. I flinched, turning my head slowly. A girl was leaning against the neighboring locker. She had vibrant, short-cropped purple hair, a constellation of silver rings on her fingers, and a kind, intelligent look in her dark eyes. It was Ivy, a girl from my art class. We'd never really spoken, but I knew who she was. She was quiet, always sketching in a worn notebook, and had a reputation for not caring what anyone thought. "Your hair keeps falling in your face," she observed simply, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I hadn't even noticed, but a long strand had escaped and was tickling my cheek. Before I could react, she reached into the pocket of her paint-splattered jeans and pulled out a plain black hair tie. "Want me to get it for you?" she asked. I was so stunned by this simple practical kindness that all I could do was nod dumbly. I turned my back to her, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a strange, unfamiliar gratitude. I expected her touch to feel weird, another reminder of my alien body, but her fingers were quick and efficient. She gathered the mass of hair, sweeping it away from my neck, and secured it in a simple, low ponytail. "There," she said, less annoying, probably. The difference was immediate. The weight of the hair was off my neck, and my peripheral vision was clear. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. It was the first time someone had interacted with my new body as a simple fact, not as a tragedy or a spectacle. Ivy became my anchor in the swirling vortex of high school cruelty. She didn't ask probing questions, she didn't offer empty platitudes, she just helped. When she saw me tripping over my own feet, my gait still awkward with my new center of gravity, she casually mentioned that walking with a narrower stance might help with balance. When my skin, now thinner and more sensitive, broke out from stress, she handed me a small, unscented tube of face wash without a word. She seemed to understand that I was still Alex on the inside, trapped in this new configuration. She'd suggest darker clothes, muted colors in styles that mirrored my old band tees and hoodies, but cut for a different frame. "You can still be you," she told me one afternoon. "The you just has to wear different packaging for now." A few weeks after my return, she dragged me to the mall. I protested, the idea of walking into a brightly lit store full of mirrors and women's clothing sending a spike of anxiety through me. "We're not going on a shopping spree," she said, rolling her eyes. "We're on a mission. Reconnaissance. You need jeans that actually fit, or you're going to trip and fall into the principal one of these days." The store was overwhelming, a sea of bright colors and soft fabrics. I felt exposed, a fraud. But Ivy navigated it all with an air of detached confidence. She ignored the frilly dresses and pink sweaters, leading me straight to a rack of dark-washed jeans. She grabbed a few pairs in different styles and shoved them into my arms. "Just try them," she ordered. "No one's looking." In the sterile, unforgiving light of the fitting room, I pulled on a pair of simple, straight-leg jeans, and just like the sweater my mom had bought me, they fit. They slid over my hips, buttoned at my new, smaller waist, and felt secure, functional. I looked in the mirror, turning side to side. It was still a girl's body, But in jeans and my combat boots, it felt a little closer to something I could recognize, a little tougher. When I came out, Ivy was waiting, holding a small tube of tinted lip balm. "What's that?" I asked suspiciously. "Chapstick with a bit of color. Your lips look dry," she said. "Matter of fact, try it. It's not lipstick. I hesitated, then took it from her. Back in the fitting room, I uncapped it. The balm was a faint sheer red. I swiped it across my lips. It felt moisturizing, and the color was barely there, just a hint of a healthy flush. I stared at my reflection. The girl in the mirror looked less haunted. The slight bit of color seemed to make my eyes look brighter, my face less pale and washed out. Ivy knocked on the door. "So what's the verdict?" I opened it, feeling incredibly self-conscious. She looked me over, her eyes taking in the jeans, the boots, the faint sheen on my lips. She offered a small, genuine smile. "Looks good, Lexi," she said quietly. "You look really okay." A lump formed in my throat. Tears pricked at the back of my eyes. "I don't want to be okay like this," I whispered, the words thick with all the grief I'd been holding back. Ivy's smile didn't falter. She just looked at me, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I know," she said, "but you are like this now, and for what it's worth, you're not ugly. You're not a freak. You're just you in a new edition." And standing there, under the fluorescent lights of a department store, looking at the stranger in the mirror who was slowly becoming less strange, I felt the first, tiny, terrifying crack in the wall of my denial. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was the first time I allowed myself to think that maybe, just maybe, survival didn't have to feel like a constant, waking nightmare. The months that followed were a blur of gradual, reluctant adaptation. With Ivy's help, I started to build a new armor for myself, one piece of clothing at a time. It became a strange kind of art project, a way to bridge the chasm between the Alex I still felt I was and the Lexi the world now saw. I found a way to merge my past and present. I'd wear one of my old, faded band t-shirts, now loose and soft on my new frame, but I'd pair it with a black skater skirt and leggings. I kept my combat boots, their heavy, defiant stomp a comforting reminder of who I used to be. But now they were laced up over skinny jeans that fit my body properly. I learned to braid my long hair, keeping it out of my face but letting it be a part of my new silhouette. It was a bizarre mashup, part grunge, part punk, part girl I never asked to be, but it started to feel like mine. The reflection in the mirror was still a source of conflict, but it was no longer a complete stranger. She looked like someone who was fighting back, in her own quiet way. The confidence was fragile, but it was there. Enough for me to agree when Ivy's friend invited us to a party. It was the first real social event I'd even considered since the change. The idea was terrifying. Parties meant crowds, loud music, and people looking at you, but it also meant a chance to feel normal, even for a few hours. The party was at a senior's house, the kind with parents who were conveniently out of town. The air was thick with the smell of cheap beer and someone's bad cologne, the bass from the speakers vibrating through the floorboards. It was a typical high school party. Down for a moment, standing in the doorway, I felt a pang of nostalgia for the Alex who would have strolled into a scene like this without a second thought, looking for his friends, ready to joke and laugh. Now, I just wanted to find a dark corner and melt into the shadows. But Ivy grabbed my hand, her silver rings cool against my skin, and pulled me toward the kitchen. And that's where I saw him. Mason. He was the captain of the basketball team, the one I had always measured myself against. We weren't exactly friends, more like respected rivals. We'd guarded each other in practice, fought for rebounds, and shared a silent acknowledgement of each other's skill on the court. He represented a world I no longer belonged to, a world of easy masculinity and athletic confidence. He was leaning against the counter, a red plastic cup in his hand, laughing at something one of his teammates said, and then he looked up, and his eyes met mine. For a second, there was no recognition. He was just looking at some girl he didn't know. Then, his eyes narrowed slightly. He tilted his head, a flicker of confusion crossing his face as he tried to place me. His gaze traveled over my face, my long hair, my outfit, a dark plaid skirt, my favorite band tee, and the ever-present combat boots. He walked over, a slow, confident stride that I used to envy. My heart started doing a weird, frantic tap dance against my ribs. "Hey," he said, his voice a low rumble over the music. "I know you, right?" I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. "Yeah, I'm Lexi. I managed to say I used to be Alex." The light bulb went on. His eyes widened in shock. But it wasn't the malicious kind of shock I'd grown used to. It was genuine surprise. He looked me over again, from head to toe. But his gaze wasn't judgmental. It was appraising. "Wow," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I never would have. I heard. But wow, you look really different." He paused, searching for the right word. "Nice. You look really nice." "Thanks, I guess," I mumbled, feeling a strange heat creep up my neck and spread across my cheeks. I was blushing. Actually blushing. The physical sensation was so foreign, so involuntary, that it startled me. It was a reaction Alex had never had. The hormones, a logical part of my brain supplied. The virus hadn't just changed my body's structure, it had rewritten my entire chemical operating system. The rush of estrogen was creating responses and feelings that were completely new to me. It was one thing to understand that intellectually, and another to feel your heart race and your face flush because a guy you used to compete with just called you nice. "So, you still skate?" he asked, trying to find common ground. "Not really," I admitted, the words tasting like failure. "Balance is different now." "Yeah, I bet." He leaned against the wall next to me, creating a small bubble for us in the chaos of the party. That must be weird as hell. "You have no idea," I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. We stood there for a while, making awkward small talk about school and teachers, but I wasn't really focused on the words. I was overwhelmingly aware of him, of his proximity, of the way his bicep brushed against my arm, of the way he looked down at me when he spoke, and my body was responding in ways I couldn't control. A fluttery, nervous energy filled my stomach. A weird, tingling awareness spread through my skin. This was wrong. This was so wrong. Mason was my rival, a guy, another jock. I wasn't supposed to feel this dizzy, hyper-aware, blushy feeling. Was this me, or was this just a chemical reaction? A side effect of the virus was Eve 9 reprogramming my brain, too forcing me to have crushes like some stereotypical teenage girl. The thought was terrifying. It was one thing to lose my body, but to lose control of my own feelings, my own attractions, that felt like the ultimate violation. Later that night, I found Ivy on the back porch, away from the noise. I collapsed into a patio chair next to her, my mind a tangled mess. "What's wrong?" she asked, seeing my expression. "I was talking to Mason," I said, the name feeling strange on my tongue, and my heart was beating really fast, and I think I was blushing, and it was just horrible. I expected her to laugh, or to be confused. Instead, she just looked at me with that unnervingly perceptive gaze of hers. "You're surprised that a teenage girl's body is having teenage girl reactions to a cute boy?" she asked gently. "But I'm not a teenage girl," I protested, my voice rising in panic. "I'm Alex, and it's reprogramming me. Ivy, it's changing how I feel." She was quiet for a moment, tracing a pattern on the condensation of her cup. "Is it?" she said finally. "Or is it just giving you a different set of tools to feel with feelings aren't a mistake? Lexi, attraction isn't a virus, it's just a feeling. You're the one who decides what it means. You're the one who's still in charge of figuring out who you are." Her words didn't magically solve everything. The confusion and fear were still there, churning inside me. But as I sat there in the cool night air, listening to the muffled beat of the party, I realized she was right about one thing. This whole journey, as horrifying as it was a process of figuring things out. The virus had thrown a bomb into my life, and I was just standing in the crater, trying to make sense of the pieces, and maybe, just maybe, some of those pieces, however strange and unwanted, were still a part of me. The news came on a Tuesday evening, delivered by my dad. He walked into the living room where I was attempting to do my calculus homework, a rare, hopeful smile on his face. It was an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "They've done it," he announced, his voice brimming with an excitement that immediately set me on edge. "The researchers, they've synthesized a retroviral agent, a cure." My pen stopped moving. The numbers on the page blurred. A cure, the word I had been desperately praying for in those first few dark, nightmarish days. The magic wand that would turn me back into Alex. "It's still experimental," he continued, rushing on, "but the early trials they're 100% effective, a complete biological reversion. They're fast-tracking it for emergency cases. We can get you on the list." My mom came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face illuminated with the same joyous relief as my dad's. "Can you believe it, honey?" she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "You can finally come back to us. You can be yourself again." You can be yourself again. The phrase echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my mind. For them, it was simple. Lexi was the illness, and Alex was the cure. This entire 6-month odyssey of pain, confusion, and terrifying self-discovery was just a horrible fever dream that was finally about to end. They were looking at me, expecting me to jump for joy, to cry with relief, to celebrate the end of my long imprisonment. But I was frozen, a block of ice in the warm glow of their happiness. My heart wasn't soaring, it was sinking, a heavy stone dropping into a deep, dark well of dread. Going back, becoming Alex again, it meant my long hair would shorten, my skin would roughen, my shoulders would broaden, my hips would narrow, my chest would flatten, my voice would drop back into its old register. The body of Alex, the one I had mourned so deeply, would return. But what about the person who had lived inside this new body? What about Lexi? What about the girl who had learned to balance on different feet, literally and figuratively, the one who had discovered a strange, unexpected confidence in mixing combat boots with skirts, the one who had felt the dizzying, terrifying flutter of a crush for the first time? What about the person who had found a friendship with Ivy, a bond forged in a unique kind of fire that Alex never would have experienced? If I took this cure, all of that would be gone. Lexi, the entire experience. Every painful lesson, every confusing emotion, every small moment of adaptation and growth would vanish as if she had never existed. It wouldn't just be changing my body back, it would be erasing a part of my history, a part of myself. "I don't want to lose myself," I whispered, the words coming out before I'd even consciously formed them. "Not again." My parents' smiles faltered. "What do you mean, honey?" my dad asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "You wouldn't be losing yourself, you'd be finding yourself again." Would I look down at my hands, at the slender fingers that had learned to braid hair and apply a subtle touch of makeup? These weren't Alex's hands, but they were my hands now. I had lived with them. I had learned to use them. I'm not Alex anymore. Not the one you remember, but I don't think I'm just Lexi either. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The virus had done something irreversible, but it wasn't just physical. It had forced me onto a journey I never would have chosen, a path of intense self-examination. I'd been stripped of my old identity, forced to build a new one from scratch, and in doing so, I discovered things about myself I never knew. I found a resilience I didn't know I possessed. I experienced emotions with a different intensity. I learned empathy in a way Alex, the confident teenage boy, never could have. To go back now would be a different kind of death. It would be an amputation of the soul. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had in a long time. I looked my parents in the eye, my own reflection mirrored in their worried faces. I needed a new name. A name that wasn't about the past or the label the school had given me. A name that was about the person I had become. A synthesis of everything I had been and everything I now was. "I'm not going back," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I choose to stay like this. I choose me." I took a deep breath. The name coming to me, feeling as natural and right as the sweater I was wearing. I choose to be Sky. Sky, not a boy's name, not a girl's name. Just a name, limitless, open, free. Tears streamed down my mom's face, but this time, they weren't tears of joy or sorrow. They were tears of confusion, of trying to understand. My dad just stared, his hope visibly deflating. This wasn't the happy ending they had envisioned. But why, my dad asked, his voice cracking. Because Alex was who I was. Lexi was what I was forced to become. But Sky, I said, a small, fragile smile touching my lips for the first time, is who I am choosing to be. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. I knew there would be more struggles, more confusion, more difficult conversations. But for the first time since that horrifying morning, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a possibility. Later that week, I met Ivy and Mason at the park. I told them both about my decision, about my new name. Ivy just smiled, a knowing, radiant smile that said she'd understood all along. Sky, she said, trying it out. I like it. It suits you. Mason was quieter, more thoughtful. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see him recalibrating, shedding his old image of me as a rival, and the new image of me as a girl. And just seeing me. He reached out and gently touched my shoulder, a simple, supportive gesture that spoke volumes. Okay. Sky, he said. Cool. That evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pavement, I rode my bike home. My hair, now unbraided, flew out behind me in the wind. I could feel the cool air on my face, the familiar rhythm of the pedals beneath my feet. I wasn't Alex, the boy who used to race down this street. And I wasn't Lexi, the terrified girl who was afraid of her own shadow. I was Sky, a person forged in a bizarre, traumatic fire who had emerged not unscathed but whole. For the first time, in this body that was once a prison, I felt a profound, exhilarating sense of peace. I felt completely and utterly myself.